I want to begin by classifying grassland plants into two basic groups, grasses and broadleaf plants. These are the two broad groups of plants that you'll usually see in grasslands. First, grasses have hollow stems, meaning the stem is filled with open space. Some grasses are noticeably more hollow than others, so this trait can vary. Next, grasses have slender leaf blades with parallel leaf veins. I'll talk more about that in future slides, so don't worry about that for now. Finally, the flowers of grasses. Yes, grasses do have flowers, but they are dull and not very visually appealing, like in other plants. You might think of the flowering structure of grasses as a seed head. Now, there are some other plants that resemble grasses, but aren't actually true grasses. Sedges and rushes are found in wet areas and not typically found in the usual North Dakota grassland. So I won't dive into those. Moving on to the second group, the broad-leaved plants. The leaves of the plants in this group are, as it sounds, large and broad. These plants also have net-like veins, and again, I will address that later. Broadleaf plants produce showy flowers in a wide variety of shapes and colors. When you probably picture the flowers of broadleaf plants. Broadleaf plants include many specific groups of plants like forbs or the wildflowers, legumes, shrubs, and trees. So, the first thing to ask yourself when identifying a plant, is it a grass or a broad-leaved plant? Now we'll zoom into the collar area of a grass. Again, starting from the bottom and up, the leaf sheath is the part of the leaf that surrounds the stem. Then the auricles are membranous lobes or outgrowths on the collar itself. Not all grasses have auricles. If you look at the picture of the two grasses on the right with the blue background, you'll see that the left grass has no auricles, while the grass on the right does have auricles. Auricles can take on a variety of shapes and sizes and even colors. Next, a ligule is an outgrowth at the junction of the sheath and the leaf blade. Ligules vary also. They can be long and membranous, like on that grass on the left in the picture, or they can be hairy, like the grass on the top. Or they can even be absent, and a plant might not even have a ligule that can be used for identifying that grass. After the ligule, the leaf blade starts. All leaf blades have veins to transport nutrients, and grasses have parallel veins, where all veins run the same direction up the leaf. The midvein is the vein in the center of the leaf. To conclude all this information, you should be familiar with the collar area and know the differences between sheaths, auricles, and ligules, because these features are very important when identifying grasses. Inflorescences can take on many shapes and sizes. Again, the inflorescence is the flowering head of a grass, and it's made up of small spikelets. Spikelets are the individual flowering units of the grass, and they all have the potential to become seeds. Spikelets can be arranged several different ways. First, a panicle has branches of spikelets on the stem. On the other hand, a spike has spikelets growing directly on the stem. All right, we're going to transition to the important parts of broadleaf plants. Broadleaf plants have leaves of two different types, simple and compound. Simple leaves attach directly to the stem, and most plants have simple leaves. Next, compound leaves are comprised of several leaflets. A leaflet is just part of the entire leaf, and one leaf might have many leaflets. Compound leaves can take on different arrangements. For example, pinnately compound leaves have leaflets that are side by side, kind of like a ladder. Palmately compound leaves have leaflets in a star formation. Understanding how simple and compound leaves differ is really important for identifying plants. One way to do that is to look for the axillary bud at the base of the leaf stem. Simple leaves have a bud at the base of every leaf stem. Compound leaves have a bud at the base of the main leaf, not at the base of each leaflet. And before I move on, I want to address the venation of broadleaf plants, how the veins are arranged on these leaves. So, if you notice on the leaf, we have a vein going up the center of the leaf, and we also um, perpendicular to that main vein. And this is creating a net-like appearance of veins. So, like I said at the beginning, broadleaf plants have these net-like veins. Next up is leaf arrangement. This is how leaves arrange themselves or grow on the stem. Alternate leaves alternate on each side of the stem. Opposite leaves grow directly opposite of each other on the stem, one on each side. Whorled leaves grow together on the same node, and a node is just a location where leaves are born. Um, these whorled leaves are kind of like opposite leaves, but with three or more leaves per node. The picture here uses simple leaves as an example, but compound leaves follow these same arrangements. Leaves can take on many shapes. It's really not that important to know the names of these different leaf shapes because there are way more than I can count. But I just want you to understand that plants have differently shaped leaves, and leaf shape can really be helpful during identification. Also, leaf size is variable and another very helpful feature to consider. The edges of leaves are called margins, but here I will just refer to them as edges because that's easier to remember. Leaf edges are another great identifying feature of plants. Some plants or smooth edges. Some plants have leaves with serrated or toothed edges. For serrated leaves, think like a saw blade. If you think of an oak tree or maple tree, those species have leaves with edges that create lobes. Some simple leaves can be so finely divided with deep lobes that they actually appear compound. So it's important that you look for that axillary bud to know if it is simple or compound. Next, understanding the variability in stems is important. Stems can be smooth and round, they can be hairy, And those hairs can be fine and soft, or maybe thicker and more stiff. Stems can be prickly with stiff, spiny outgrowths from the stem. They can also be square or have edges. Leaves can also take on these different textures. The textures of stems and leaves is a super important characteristic when identifying plants, so keep it in mind. The final basic part of broadleaf plants is the flowering structure. Take a look at the final basic part of broadleaf. The final basic part of broadleaf plants is the flowering structure. Take a look at the picture on the left. While we usually refer to a flower head as a singular flower, there are actually many flowers there. We have the ray flowers, which are the petals, and we have the disc flowers, which is the center of the flower head. After being pollinated by insects, these flowers become fruit. In this case, fruit is a broad term for something that contains a seed. I'm not referring to an edible fruit like an apple or an orange. Many times, the fruit will take on the appearance of a dandelion, where seeds are contained in protective structures with cotton-like fluff to allow them to be carried away by the wind. All right, that concludes the PowerPoint on plant morphology. Here, I just have one additional resource. It's a blog post that provides some more information on leaves. Now, I pretty much talked about everything you should know for identifying plants here, but this resource does provide some more information about leaves.